Hey guys, what's up? After I made my last video, it occurred to me that some of you may not know where to start when it comes to actually building the computer, such as picking out components. So what I thought I would do is guide you through the steps of how that's done. Now I'm gonna say that talk about certain hardware and such, but you don't necessarily have to get the specific hardware I'm pointing at. It's just to give you a rough idea of how it works and what you should be looking out for. Now, that being said, let's get on with this. When you're first building a PC or you're thinking about building a PC, you want to consider what the computer is going to be primarily used for. Now, that could go anywhere from home office use to gaming to video editing to photoshopping to whatever the hell you want to do with this computer. Now, after you have that figured out, you might want to set a budget for yourself also. It's not necessary, but having a budget is nice to make sure you don't overspend. So, that being said, let's get right into this. First off, you're going to have to go and look at a motherboard, which is where I like to start off with. You don't necessarily have to start off with a motherboard, but that's what I like to do. And when you're picking a motherboard, two of the standards I would say are ATX and micro ATX, and it really comes down to does size matter for you? Which means are you going to be mobile with this computer? Are you going to take it from place to place? Do you need to put it somewhere compact? But usually people would go ATX, which is pretty much the norm for desktop computers. And when you're looking at motherboards, you want to make sure you're also looking at the PCI slots for sound cards and video cards, the PCIe slots, which is a pretty much newer version of PCI. And if you want any onboard video or onboard sound or anything of that matter. Also, you want to make sure to get either Intel or AMD, depending on what kind of processor you are going to put inside of this machine. And that brings us to the next component, which would be the processor itself, or the CPU. And I would recommend going with the i-series processor, but AMD is known as the budget processor. And when you're looking at your motherboard, you want to make sure that the socket type fits the processor you're going to buy. So most motherboards these days for Intel, would be using LGA 1155, 775, or 1156 CPU socket, and AMD would use a AM2 plus socket, AM3, AM3 plus, something around those lines. It really depends what motherboard you're looking at. Some motherboards will be able to support, one or two different CPUs. But I think the AMD motherboards are more convenient that way. Now, the last thing you want to look at when picking out a processor is whether it's going to be 32-bit or 64-bit. Now, the i-series, I believe, are all 64-bit, if I'm not mistaken, including the i3. Don't quote me on that one, but I'm pretty sure they at least support 64-bit. And this really comes down to the operating system at the end, because if you could have a 32-bit operating system running on a 64-bit processor, but you're just going to be losing a lot of processing power that is just wasted, just lying there. But I would highly recommend going with a 64-bit processor. You will be able to double check that when looking at processors. Now keep in mind, I'm doing all this assuming you're using Newegg, so just look on Newegg for references. They have a bunch of details on all the components. After you pick out the CPU, you want to look into the RAM, and I would say that 8 gigabytes would be the standard for a desktop these days. And RAM is fairly cheap also, so you shouldn't worry too much about overspending when it comes to RAM. And it's always nice to have RAM. When looking at the RAM, you want to make sure you have some decent speeds. You will see numbers such as 1600, 1033, 1333, and they signify the speeds that the RAM runs on. So 1600 out of the ones I named would probably be the fastest. 1333 would be something in the middle, and 1033 would be in the lower range. But it really depends on what your motherboard could support. Always refer to your motherboard and see what your motherboard supports, and really what you're going to be using it for. If you're going to be doing a lot of video editing and hardcore computer intensive stuff, you're going to probably want to go with something a little faster compared to if you're going to be doing a lot of home office work or networking and stuff like that. But like I said, it really depends what you want to do. So after you have the RAM picked out, we're going to look at hard drives. With hard drives, there's two ways to go about it. You could go SSD or you could go HDD. Now the differences are that a SSD is a solid-state drive, which uses the same technology found in USB flash drives, and HDD is a hard disk drive, which is the old-style mechanical ones, but they're still pretty common today. They're a little more expensive than they used to be because of a flood in Thailand, but let's not get into that. So it really depends on what you're looking for. SSDs have a smaller capacity, but they're extremely fast, much faster than your typical hard drive. So it really comes down to, are you willing to spend that money? And it really depends on what you're looking for. With hard disk drives, the speeds vary, going at about the lowest ones would be like 5400 RPMs, something in the mid-range would be 7200 RPMs, and you have the 10,000 RPMs, which is the fastest one. And what I would do is I would go with 7200 if you're not going to be doing anything too crazy, because the 10,000 RPM ones, they may, I'm not saying they will, but they may have a chance of overheating much more than the lower speed ones. 5400 is usually found in laptops, and I would just go with something like 7200 just to get in the middle, have best of both worlds. Now, if you do decide to get more than one hard drive for whatever reason, make sure, don't make sure, but it would be nice to have the same type of hard drive. Either that, especially if you're going to be doing something like RAID. I'm not going to go into RAID, but if you do want to do something like RAID, you would start off with two of the same exact hard drives for best results. So next, we would go with what kind of accessories you would want, such as a video card if you want to have something that you're going to be doing graphic intensive stuff with. You might want to go with a dedicated video card, a sound card if you want to have nice sound quality and clarity when you're listening to music or movies or whatever you want. Usually the onboard sound, I would guess you could call it a card, sound cards on motherboards, they usually do the job. That's what I use. I don't really have a problem with it. But if you do want to have a dedicated sound card for a little better sound experience, then that's always a good option. You could also get USB hubs that plug right into the PCI slots, and the list just goes on and on with all these extra peripherals and components you could put on the motherboard. But make sure you have that in mind. That if you want to get that, make sure the motherboard will be able to support all the peripherals you want to buy. Now, the last thing I would get would be the power supply. The reason it's the last thing is because I want to make sure that I have everything set up before I move on to the power supply. Because if you start off getting a 400 watt power supply, and then you get a video card that says you should have a recommended 500 watt power supply, you're gonna have to go back and switch it around, and it's just gonna get really messy and unorganized. So power supply would be the last thing, and it really depends on what you're doing. If you're gonna do a lot of graphic intensive work, it would be obvious that you also need a video card, and if you have a video card, you're gonna need a little extra power to power everything up. So make sure you have that set up, and really you don't want to have too much power, but at the same time it's better to have more power than less power. So I would say a standard would be around 600 watts just to be on the very safe side. You could get by with 500 even. If it's home office use, there's no video card, 400 could even do the job. Like I said, it really depends what you're putting inside of the computer. Now, after you have all those components picked out, the motherboard, the CPU, the RAM, and your accessories, you would go for the case. Now, a case, I would say, is mostly a matter of taste, because if you want something nice, it's going to obviously cost a little more. If you want something that has a little more functionality, like toolless hardware installation, little LCD screen on the front, whatever you want like that, that's all a matter of taste, and it's going to be a little pricier if it has those kind of features. Whereas if you get a really plain case for $20-$30, it's not going to have anything except the chassis and little plastic buttons that turn it on and stuff like that. So like I said, it's a matter of taste. Make sure that it fits the form factor of your motherboard. They do have cases that support both ATX and micro ATX, which are the ones I talked about earlier, and they have cases that support only ATX or only micro ATX. So make sure you're looking out for that. And it really does matter if the case supports it, because the screws it's going to come with, the little mounting screws and everything, it's all going to rely on the case itself. So make sure your motherboard will fit appropriately in the case. Now the very last thing you're going to have to worry about is the operating system. Now it goes back to if you got a 32-bit or 64-bit processor and what exactly you want to be done. Now I'm assuming that you would want to install Windows, because building a Hackintosh, as what we call it, a Mac from random components, it's going to be a little more difficult. You might have some stability issues, or even compatibility issues for that matter. But usually you'd go Windows. These days would be Windows 7. You could get Windows XP if that's what you want to do. You can also go with a free operating system such as Linux, and they make a couple of operating systems, not just one in particular, and these are completely free, by the way. I would suggest going with something like Ubuntu if you're a beginner with Linux. There's also Fedora, which is a great starting place, and also Linux Mint. Now these operating systems are actually very similar to each other, but they also differ. Now I'm not going to go into detail because that's completely up to you if you want to go with that, but it's worth checking out. There's also a lot of Linux support these days than there was before. So if there's drivers and stuff out there that for your components, I'm sure there would be a choice for Linux. So yeah, but I don't want to go overboard with this. This was just a brief overview of what you would need for to build a computer. So if you guys do have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I will be happy to help you guys out. And I'm hoping that you guys do consider building a computer, because it's a great way to have your own personalized, customized PC. So I hope this video was very helpful for you guys, and like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to post them and I will answer them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.